The first time the Heartbreak compliance system spoke to me, it did it in the voice of a customer service hotline. Warm, patient, and perfectly uninterested in whether I was alive. I had been alive a moment earlier, alive enough to file a piece on corrupt charities, alive enough to promise my editor I would be in by midnight, alive enough to think caffeine could substitute for sleep forever. Then a delivery van ran a red light, my notebook flew like a frightened bird, and the world blinked out as if someone had pressed mute on reality. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on an ivory carpet that smelled like lilies and money. A crystal chandelier stared down at me like a judgmental star. A ring glittered on my left hand, and in the mirror across the room, a woman I did not recognize stared back with my panic in her eyes and someone else's soft, famous face. "Congratulations," the system said. "You have been successfully deployed as the secondary female lead in Romance of the Radiant Star." A cold icon hovered in the air near the window. Task progress 47%. Reward balance. Pending. I had watched enough serialized dramas to know what secondary female lead meant in a story that loved pain. It meant you were the practice dummy the author punched, until the heroine looked shinier by contrast. It meant your tears were a currency that bought other people's happy endings. The system confirmed that with a cheerful ping. Your role is Mina Clark, legal spouse of executive producer Rowan Pierce. Your function is to suffer strategically, guide the plot to its designated reconciliation arc, and return to your origin world upon completion. Deviations will incur penalties. Endurance will incur rewards. I tried to laugh. It came out like a cough. You kidnapped a journalist and hired her as a human punching bag. Correct, the system said. Please proceed to scene 12. Humiliation at the press conference. And so I did, because the first penalty it showed me was a glimpse of my hospital bed back home, my body pale, my mother's hands shaking over my fingers, and I discovered that morality is easy when you are not being blackmailed by the universe. For months I obeyed like a trained animal. I smiled when Rowan introduced me as a friend. I bowed my head when tabloids called me a gold digger. I apologized when Dahlia Snow, the nation's beloved actress with a gaze like spring water, cried on cue, and everyone blamed me for existing in her sunlight. I let my stepmother send me invoices disguised as family concern. I let my father treat me like a walking ATM with a pretty face. I endured, because endurance was the price of going home. Halfway to the finish line, the system began to feel less like a god and more like a faulty app. Sometimes its instructions lagged. Sometimes the reward counter flickered. Sometimes, in the middle of a scripted argument, it went silent long enough for me to hear my own thoughts again. And those thoughts sounded like a knife being sharpened. On the morning it finally died, it did not explode with drama or warnings. It simply blinked once, like a bored eyelid, and turned black. Task progress 49%. Reward balance. Error. The air where its icon had floated became ordinary air. I stared at the blank space and waited for the threat, for the punishment, for the familiar electronic throat clearing. Nothing came. The quiet was so complete it made my skin itch. I touched my temple as if I could reboot the universe with my fingertips. The only thing louder than the silence was the thought that followed it. I had suffered for nothing. Months of swallowing insults. Months of playing the obedient wife in a loveless penthouse. Months of letting the plot chew me into a shape it liked and the paycheck was gone. It is possible to be heartbroken for love. It is also possible to go feral because your employer vanished without paying. I went feral. I didn't cry. I got dressed. I chose a black dress that looked like a verdict and pinned a white camellia to my chest, absurdly large, like a funeral flower someone had mistaken for jewelry. I applied lipstick the color of fresh bruises. I walked out of Rowan's house with the calm of a woman who had just fired her god. In the novel's original schedule, Dahlia Snow's birthday gala was meant to be the scene where Mina Me stood quietly in a corner and watched her husband worship another woman, because pain was romantic. The system had forced me to attend once, in rehearsal. I was supposed to swallow my pride, then later miscarry from stress, then forgive Rowan in a rainstorm as the violins swelled. I remembered every detail because humiliation is a strong glue for memory. The venue was a glass conservatory built over a garden of white flowers. The theme was purity. It looked, to my less poetic eyes, like a very expensive funeral. I arrived early enough to hear the staff whispering about the guest list. Directors, investors, influencers, the people who fed the entertainment machine and called it art. I found Rowan in the greenhouse walkway, exactly where the original plot had placed him, as if he couldn't think outside a script even when the script was dead. He was tall and flawless in a suit the color of midnight. He stood beneath an arch of white camellias, and in his arms was Dahlia, delicate, luminous, dressed in gauze and innocence. They were close in that way that turns other people into scenery. When she rose on her toes and pressed her mouth to his, the kiss wasn't a mistake. It was a declaration. It said, "I belong here." It said, "Your marriage is a technicality." For 1 second, I watched without moving, because my brain was still trying to locate the system's leash. Then the itch of freedom turned into something else. A grin. My phone was already in my hand. I had meant to take a photo, a private receipt. My thumb slipped on the screen as if guided by fate's nastier sense of humor. "Live now," the app announced, and my front camera reflected my own eyes, bright, furious, almost laughing. I should have ended it. I didn't. I turned the camera. Dahlia's face filled the frame, perfect and unaware. Rowan's hand rested on her waist like ownership. The chat poured in at once, strangers arriving like moths to a flame. "Who is that? Is that Dahlia Snow? Why is she kissing a man in a wedding ring?" The first donation pinged like a bell. The second followed. Somewhere in me, the journalist who had chased stories through alleyways and courtrooms lifted her head. "Welcome," I said, voice smooth as polished glass. "If you're new here, tap follow. We're doing live investigative reporting tonight." I stepped closer, close enough that the scent of Dahlia's perfume hit me clean, expensive, weaponized. Rowan saw me at the same time the chat did. His expression shattered into something raw. Shock first, then anger, then the quick calculation of a man used to controlling narratives. Dahlia flinched back a half step, eyes widening with that practiced fragility that made audiences want to protect her. I tilted the phone, obliging the viewers who begged for a clearer angle. "For anyone confused," I continued, "the woman in white is Miss Dahlia Snow, national sweetheart, brand ambassador for virtue. The man kissing her is Rowan Pierce, my husband. Legal. Documented. Very boring in bed, but excellent at public romance." Gasps went through the nearby guests, like wind through dry grass. Someone raised their own phone. Then another. Dahlia's cheeks drained of color. Rowan's jaw clenched hard enough to crack marble. "Mina," he hissed, stepping toward me. I kept my smile. "Say hi," I told him, cheerful, as if we were co-hosting a cooking show. People love when the cast acknowledges the audience. Also, we're at 90,000 viewers already and climbing. The chat exploded into capital letters. Someone gifted a ridiculous amount of money. A commenter demanded I zoom in. Another asked if this was promotional content. I raised my brows and offered the line that would haunt Rowan for weeks. "If we hit 1 million likes, I'll ask them to reenact the kiss for better coverage." Rowan lunged for my phone. Years of dodging elbows in protest crowds did something useful. I pivoted, slipped under his reach, and kept filming. The camera caught the flash of his temper before he remembered cameras made everything permanent. Dahlia's bodyguard edged forward. I lifted my free hand, palm out, like a traffic cop. "Careful," I warned softly. "Touch me on camera and the brand sponsors will faint." Someone laughed nervously. Someone else said my name like it was a curse. I didn't care. For the first time since arriving in this world, the story was not happening to me. I was driving. By the time security escorted me out, the internet had already swallowed the gala whole. Clips ripped across platforms in seconds. Hashtags multiplied like bacteria. Rose Room Betrayal trended first, then Dahlia Snow Homewrecker. Then, most satisfyingly, who is Mina Clark? Commentators did what they always did. They built a narrative from scraps and called it truth. They dug up my marriage certificate, my old interviews, my very carefully manufactured image as the quiet wife who never complained. The fans who had once thrown stones at me for being jealous turned around so fast you could hear the whiplash. Dahlia's fanbase tried to defend her, of course. They insisted love was pure and paperwork was a prison. I watched them argue like ants on sugar and finally, laughed until my ribs hurt. Rowan came to my apartment that night like a storm with polished shoes. The apartment had belonged to Mina's late mother, a modest place with sunlight that didn't judge. Rowan stood in the doorway as if the threshold offended him. "Have you lost your mind?" he demanded. I looked him up and down. "Probably. Do you want to file a complaint with the management?" "Oh, wait." He advanced, voice low, dangerous. "Dahlia is a public figure. You've destroyed her." I blinked slowly. "Did I force you to kiss her in a greenhouse full of witnesses? Did I write you a script and hand you the lines? Or did you two destroy her all by yourselves and I just added subtitles?" His hands clenched. For a second, I saw the man the novel wanted him to be. Controlling, cruel, convinced that his guilt could be erased by blaming me for pointing at it. I stood up. Listen carefully. Rowan Pierce, I said, and my voice carried the cold clarity of a newsroom at 2 a.m. You don't get to betray me and then lecture me about decorum. You don't get to use my silence as a shield and then rage when I stop being useful. He reached for my wrist. I moved faster. My knee came up, sharp and efficient, not to permanently damage anything because I had no desire to be trapped in court over anatomy, but enough to make him fold with a strangled sound. He stumbled back, clutching himself, eyes wide with disbelief. I suggest, I added pleasantly, that you consider divorce before I discover new ways to express my opinions. He stared at me from the floor as if I had spoken a foreign language. In the old plot, Mina would have sobbed, begged, apologized, then cooked him soup. In the old plot, his anger would have been framed as passion. In the old plot, my pain would have been the spice that made their eventual reunion taste earned. I picked up my bag. I'm sending paperwork, I said. If you pretend you didn't see it, I'll send it again. I'm stubborn like that. I left him on my living room rug like a discarded prop and locked the door behind me. At dawn, when my adrenaline finally leaked out of my bloodstream, reality came to collect its fee. Mina Clark's bank account was a cruel joke. Rowan had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that reduced my marriage to a decorative accessory. If we divorced, I walked away with nothing but my own name and whatever I had bought before the wedding. The system's reward money had been the only reason I had signed without burning the papers. Now the system was dust, and the agreement remained. Worse, Mina had debts, old medical bills from her mother's illness, advances she had taken on acting jobs that were later canceled, penalties from broken endorsements after Dahlia's return. Her manager, a man who treated percentages like a religion, had skimmed her paychecks into thin air. I opened my notes app and made a list, because despair is easier to face when it becomes numbers. The list was long. The hope was thin. Then my gala livestream revenue hit my account, and I remembered something important. I knew how to make people look. I had done it for a living. I had chased stories not because I liked attention, but because truth survives when it is witnessed. In this world, attention was currency, and I was suddenly rich in the one asset that mattered. A scandal with legs. I hired a divorce attorney with money that smelled faintly like revenge, and sent Rowan the first draft of a settlement. I emailed my manager a polite request for a full accounting of my contracts, payments, and deductions, with my lawyer copied in. Then I did something Mina had not done in the novel. I planned a future that didn't depend on love. 2 days later, I returned to set, because Mina's career was a sinking boat and I needed every plank. The production was a glossy thriller where Dahlia played an angelic prosecutor and I played her jealous rival, another version of the same insult, filmed from better angles. Crew members watched me the way people watch a newly domesticated wild animal, curious, afraid, hoping not to be bitten. Dahlia arrived late in oversized sunglasses, her entourage orbiting like a private planet. She looked at me with a smile that could cut fruit. "You're enjoying yourself," she murmured, careful to keep her voice low so the microphones wouldn't eat it. "Enjoy it while you can." I returned her smile, wider. "Oh, I plan to," I said. "I'm the type who learns new hobbies when stressed. Right now, my hobby is accountability." The day's stunt involved a harness, a controlled fall from a balcony, and the kind of risk producers like because it looks like bravery when it goes right and like tragedy when it goes wrong. In the original novel, Dahlia's team bribed the stunt coordinator to loosen my rigging so I would get hurt and Rowan would rush to the hospital, moved by my suffering into realizing he loved me. It was a disgusting romantic math. Hurt her plus rescue her equals redemption. Without the system, I could finally do what my old self always did with corrupt math. Audit it. I watched the coordinator's hands. The quick glance toward Dahlia's assistant. The way a bolt was turned half a beat too fast. I nodded as if I didn't notice, and, while the crew reset lights, quietly adjusted my own secondary line. Journalism teaches you, if you can't stop the trap, build a second door. "Action!" the director shouted. I stepped onto the balcony railing, took a breath, and fell. The primary cable jerked wrong loose, sliding exactly as planned by someone who hated me. Instead of panicking, I twisted my torso, shifted my weight to the backup line, and used the slack like a swing. For a heartbeat, I hung in the air, skirt flaring, hair flying, the camera drinking it up. Then I landed in a crouch on the padded mat, steady as a gymnast, and looked straight at the stunned crew. "Maybe," I said, loud enough for everyone. "We should review safety protocols before someone writes an obituary." The set went silent. The coordinator turned the color of wet paper. Dahlia's smile froze. Somewhere behind the monitors, someone began clapping before they remembered it was inappropriate. Rowan arrived 10 minutes later, because of course he did. He always entered scenes like he was late to his own spotlight. He pushed through the crowd, eyes scanning for blood, for tears, for evidence that I still needed him. When he saw me standing, unbroken, his face tightened with something I almost recognized as disappointment. "What happened?" he demanded. I leaned closer and lowered my voice, sweet as syrup. "Your investment tried to save money on safety," I said. "Tragic. By the way, how's your public image? I hear it's delicate." His expression twitched. Dahlia stepped forward, eyes shining with practiced concern. "Mina, are you okay?" she asked, voice soft enough to make the audience hug their phones. I met her gaze. "Wonderful," I replied. "I'm discovering that gravity has better manners than most people here." Rowan's temper flared, and then his body betrayed him. Perhaps it was the stress, perhaps the ulcer his assistant had whispered about for years, perhaps the simple fact that men like him are not built to be laughed at. His face drained. He swayed. The crew rushed forward. Rowan collapsed like a marionette whose strings had been cut. The director yelled for an ambulance. Dahlia cried out his name, hands fluttering uselessly. I stood to one side, watching professionals take over, thinking with detached surprise. I didn't push him. I didn't have to. Consequences were doing their own choreography now. The hospital was fluorescent and honest in a way celebrity parties never were. Rowan lay in a private room, monitors beeping like impatient metronomes. Dahlia stationed herself at his bedside as if she had a claim. The tabloids outside tried to photograph through curtains. I sat in the visitor chair, scrolling through the latest clips of my stunt save, because I am not immune to irony. The moment the plot wanted to break me, it made me look heroic instead. The nurse brought paperwork. My lawyer called. "Your husband is delaying," she said. "He hasn't signed anything." I laughed quietly. "Of course he hasn't," I said. "He thinks marriage is a brand partnership. He'll only end it if he believes he's the one pulling the plug." My father arrived at the hospital with my stepmother and her son, because when disasters happen, my family travels toward them like scavengers to a carcass. My father's suit was expensive, and his eyes were cheap. "What did you do?" he demanded before he even said hello. My stepmother clutched her handbag as if it were a holy relic. The boy, my half-brother in paperwork, only made a face at me and whispered something ugly he had learned from adults who thought children were blank slates. I smiled. "You're here to scold me," I guessed, "or to ask for money. Should we save time and do both?" My father's nostrils flared. "A woman's duty is to keep her husband's house in order," he snapped. "You made a spectacle. You embarrassed our family." "Our family?" I echoed, amused. "You mean the family that sent me away at 16 because a fortune teller told you I carried bad luck? The family that calls only when the invoice is due? That family?" My stepmother's eyes narrowed. "Mind your mouth," she warned. I lifted my phone, and with the same calm I used at the gala, opened my notes. "Since we're discussing duty," I said, "let's update everyone on yours." I spoke softly, as if sharing gossip over tea. I told my father about the secretary who had been meeting him after hours, the apartment he had purchased under a shell company, the pregnancy he had tried to hide by paying for a private clinic. I told my stepmother about the producer she had been seeing, the gifts she had bought with my father's money, the messages she had deleted but not erased from the cloud. Their faces changed in real time. Anger to fear, to the desperate arithmetic of people realizing the blackmail balance had shifted. My father stammered. My stepmother grabbed his sleeve and hissed accusations. The boy stared between them, confused. I saved the best for last, because I am not kind when I am cornered. "Also," I added, "if you're going to threaten me with family, you might want to confirm whose family the boy is actually part of. A DNA test would be educational." Silence fell like a curtain. My father's mouth opened. His hands shook. He sank into a chair as if his bones had turned to sand. A nurse rushed in, alarmed. My stepmother screeched my name like it was a spell meant to curse me. I stepped back and let the nurses do their job. I wasn't proud of the cruelty, but I was done being polite to people who used love as a weapon. Rowan woke that evening, eyes dull with medication and pride. He looked at me as if I were a problem he had not solved yet. "You didn't come," he said hoarsely, as though my absence had injured him. "I'm here," I replied, glancing at the IV drip. "Do you want me to applaud your stomach for surviving your personality?" His gaze sharpened. "You're punishing me," he said. "You've always wanted attention." I leaned forward. "No," I corrected. "I've always wanted respect. Attention is just the cheap substitute you people trade." He swallowed, grimacing. "The divorce papers," he began. I waited. He hesitated. "Forget them," he said finally, like a king granting mercy. "Stay. You're still my wife." I stared at him for 3 full heartbeats, letting the absurdity settle. Then I laughed, not loudly, but with the kind of sound that carries contempt. "Rowan," I said, "you can't unsee a contract by pretending it never reached your eyes. I paid a lawyer. I like getting what I pay for." He bristled, anger rising against the painkillers. "You'll regret this," he warned. "Without me, you have nothing." Dahlia shifted at his bedside, watching me like a cat watches a bird it can't reach. I smiled at her, and then at him. "If you could buy my silence," I said, "you would have done it already. But you thought my pride was free." The next week proved Rowan's favorite hobby, retaliation disguised as business. He canceled a contract my father's company depended on, assuming it would drag me back by the throat of filial guilt. He didn't know my father was already busy, imploding under the weight of his own secrets. Rowan ordered my manager to manage me, which meant pressuring me to apologize publicly to Dahlia for misunderstandings. My manager tried. He brought cigarettes into the conference room, blew smoke like confidence, and told me to kneel metaphorically so I could keep my career. "You're trending now," he said. "Trending fades. Dahlia is permanent. Go to Rowan, make it sweet, and you'll still have a seat at the table." I looked at the contract he slid toward me, a reality program reboot called Back to the Soil Live, promising 6 celebrities, a rural town, and 24-hour live stream coverage. In bold letters, no edits, no script, no safety net. I felt something like delight bloom behind my ribs. "I'll take the show," I said. My manager choked on his own smoke. "Are you insane?" he demanded. "That program destroyed people. Your haters will eat you alive." I shrugged. "Let them," I said. "I'm hungry too." He stared as if I had grown horns. "If you go," he warned, "Rowan will shut you down." I tapped the contract with my finger. "Then he can explain to the investors why the star of the season vanished," I said. "He loves control. Let's see how he handles losing it in public." The cast list was a carefully engineered storm. Dahlia Snow, of course, because the producers wanted the purity narrative. Me, because they wanted a villain. Kira Voss, an award-winning actress fresh off a divorce that had gone nuclear in tabloids. Jasper Lynn, a rich kid with a mouth faster than his acting skills. Faith Park, a singer rumored to have a mysterious patron. And Owen Hart, a former idol turned serious actor, famous for being too sincere and therefore suspicious. The director greeted us at the airport holding a phone like a priest holds incense. "We're live," he said, eyes shining with ratings. The chat rolled over the screen in waves, fans cheering, haters foaming, gossip accounts feeding on every micro-expression. I smiled at the camera like it was an old enemy I knew how to defeat. "Hello," I said. "Today's lesson is, if you can't get justice, at least get good lighting." The comments flew. Someone asked if I was really married. Someone demanded I apologize to Dahlia. Someone begged me to spill more about Rowan. I lifted a water bottle and took a slow sip. Because patience is a performance too. "Yes," I said when I swallowed. "I'm married. No, I'm not happy about it. And yes, I'm trying to divorce. Unfortunately, my husband believes paperwork is optional when you're rich." The director's grin widened. Across the terminal, Dahlia's smile trembled like a curtain in a draft. We arrived in the town at dusk. The houses were low, and the air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke. Chickens wandered like they owned the streets. The production house, an old courtyard home renovated for cameras, had microphones hidden in its beams and lights tucked behind potted plants. The point was to make it look natural while recording every awkward breath. Dahlia approached me first, angelic in white, because she understood optics. "Mina," she said softly, eyes glistening. "Can we talk privately?" I glanced toward the nearest camera and then back at her. "We can talk publicly," I said. "It saves time." Her lips tightened. The chat screamed with delight. That night, the tasks began. Cook dinner using local ingredients. Split chores fairly. Sleep in rooms assigned by a lottery designed to maximize conflict. Jasper complained about mosquito bites as if they were assassins. Faith tried to be sweet and failed. Owen offered to wash dishes and was accused of being fake. Kira watched everything with the weary amusement of a woman who had survived worse than group dynamics. She sat beside me while we shelled peanuts and said quietly, "They want you to break." I nodded. "They wanted Mina to break too," I said. Kira's brows lifted. "You talk like you're not her," she observed. I smiled without showing teeth. "Sometimes," I replied. "A person is a role until the role stops paying." By the second day, Dahlia's mask began to slip. She was used to cameras that adored her. Cameras that softened her jaw and edited out her impatience. Live cameras are less loyal. When a farmer's wife taught us how to plant seedlings, Dahlia complained about dirt on her nails. When Owen tried to help her carry water, she snapped at him for splashing her shoes. Then she remembered the chat and widened her eyes into innocence. The viewers noticed. I didn't need to push. I only needed to stand still and let reality do what it does best. Contradict a lie. Still, the producers tried to frame me. They assigned me the hardest chores, then filmed Dahlia, saving me with a sympathetic smile. They whispered instructions to Jasper to provoke me. They cut the Wi-Fi for my phone at inconvenient times and blamed it on the mountains. The old plot reached for me like an old habit. I reached back with a pen. I began keeping notes again, real notes, not the system's prompts. I wrote down timestamps, names, who spoke to which staff member, who left their mic pack accidentally turned off. I saved screenshots when anonymous accounts sent threats. I forwarded doxing attempts to my lawyer. When packages arrived at the production office, dead insects, foul-smelling trash, letters calling me vile. I asked the local police officer who served as our safety consultant to file reports on camera. The director tried to stop me. "Don't make it heavy," he pleaded. "The audience wants fun." I smiled. "The audience," I said, "wants truth. Fun is just truth wearing a party hat." Rowan called on the third night. The screen flashed his name like a bad omen. The chat went silent. Hungry. I answered on speaker. "Mina," Rowan said, voice controlled. "You're humiliating yourself." I leaned back against the wooden pillar of the courtyard and watched fireflies blink in the grass. "You mean I'm humiliating you?" I corrected. A pause. "Come home," he said. "We'll talk." Behind his calm, I heard the familiar arrogance. The assumption that I belonged in his house like furniture. I laughed softly. "I am home," I said. "I'm in a place where the air doesn't smell like lies." He exhaled sharply. "If you keep this up, I'll end the show," he threatened. I glanced at the camera and lifted my brows. "If you do," I said, "please explain it to the sponsors live. I'm sure they'll love the part where you censor your wife to protect your girlfriend." After the call, Kira handed me a cup of tea. "He's scared," she said. "And it wasn't a question." I nodded. "He's losing control of the story," I replied. Kira's eyes sharpened. "Then take it completely," she advised. "Don't just survive. Redirect." Her words stuck. The next morning, I asked the director for access to the farm's accounting board, the part of the show where we displayed how much we earned from selling produce at the market. "Why?" he demanded. "Because," I said, "numbers are honest. People trust numbers. Also, someone is cheating." He laughed at first. Then he realized I wasn't joking. It wasn't hard to find the rot. A supplier listed on the show's purchase orders didn't exist in the county registry. A local sponsorship contract had signatures that matched none of the supposed sponsor's handwriting. Crew members were paying Dahlia's assistant in cash for consulting, a euphemism that meant manipulating scenes. I could have confronted the director privately. Instead, I waited for the weekly live meeting segment, when all cast members gathered around a table to discuss teamwork, and the audience voted on rewards. Dahlia sat with her hands folded, eyes bright, playing saint. Rowan, as the main investor, joined via video call, his face framed in corporate calm. The chat counter climbed into the millions. "Before we vote," I said, raising my hand like a student in class, "I have a question about our budget." The director's smile twitched. "Mina," he warned lightly, "don't derail." "I love rails," I interrupted. "They keep trains from crashing. So, about this supplier." I lifted my phone and mirrored my screen to the big monitor the crew used for live comments. A document filled the display. Invoices, registrations, screenshots, every piece labeled with time and source. Gasps rippled through the courtyard. The chat erupted. Dahlia's eyes widened, Rowan's face tightened into stone. I continued calmly, as if presenting a report to an editor. This vendor is fake. This money is moving from the show's account into a private wallet. These consulting payments started the same day I arrived. And here, I added, tapping a line, is the message thread where Dahlia's team discusses how to provoke me into an evil outburst for ratings. Dahlia's mouth opened. No sound came out. Her saintly expression failed to load. Jasper whispered, "Holy," and caught himself because we were live. Owen stared at Dahlia with something like betrayal. Faith's hands trembled. Kira leaned back, eyes glittering, as if she had been waiting for this particular sunset. The director reached for the monitor controls. "Cut the feed," he hissed. But the feed didn't cut. The livestream platform displayed a warning. "Investor override required." Rowan's face filled the screen again, and for a second I saw naked panic behind his eyes. If he cut the feed, he confirmed there was something to hide. If he let it run, he watched his carefully maintained world burn in real time. Rowan chose pride. "This is inappropriate," he said coldly. "Mina, you're making accusations without evidence?" I finished for him. "I'm literally showing it." I scrolled. More messages appeared. Dahlia instructing staff to accidentally misplace my ingredients, to isolate me during tasks, to push Jasper into calling me names that would trigger a reaction. The chat turned on her like a tide. Dahlia began to cry, because tears were her shield. "I only wanted peace," she whispered. "I didn't mean—" "You meant control," I said, not unkindly, simply accurate. "You built your career on being untouchable. You thought if you played Angel long enough, nobody would notice the claws." Rowan's voice rose. "Enough," he snapped. "You've done your damage. Come back and we'll discuss this privately." The old Mina would have flinched. I looked directly into the camera instead, into the eyes of millions. "No," I said. "We'll discuss it publicly, because public is the only language your kind respects." My lawyer, who I had warned in advance, sent me a message. I opened it and read aloud, because the best part of revenge is paperwork. "Under Section 8 of our prenuptial agreement," I said, "infidelity voids the financial waiver. Meaning, I don't walk away with nothing. Meaning, the contract you used as a leash is now a rope around your own wrists." Rowan's face went pale. The chat exploded into a roar of virtual fireworks. Dahlia sobbed harder, but now the tears sounded like strategy failing. The director stood frozen, realizing the season's drama had just become a legal case. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed. My chest felt lighter, as if someone had unhooked a weight I had worn for months. "Rowan Pierce," I said, voice steady, "you can sign the divorce papers today, or you can sign them in court. Either way, this marriage ends. And for the record, I'm done auditioning for the role of forgiving wife. That part is no longer available." The next minutes were chaos. Crew members shouting, Dahlia's assistant trying to grab phones, Jasper whispering excitedly into his mic, Owen asking if anyone was going to call the police, Kira calmly sipping tea like a woman watching a house burn from a safe distance. Rowan's call disconnected. The livestream kept running because the platform smelled blood and profit. I stood up from the table, bowed once toward the local villagers who had been dragged into our circus, and apologized to them not for my anger, but for the way rich people treat other people's lives as content. Then I walked out of the courtyard and into the dark road lined with bamboo, where the air was cool and finally, blessedly, mine. 2 days later, the show's production was suspended pending investigation. News outlets ran my documents. Sponsors quietly fled. Dahlia's team released statements full of passive voice and wounded innocence. Rowan's company stock dipped. My phone rang nonstop with invitations. Interviews, podcasts, brands who wanted to rent my outrage for marketing. My manager called, voice shaking. "You're insane," he said, half terrified, half worshipful. "You just destroyed the season." "No," I corrected. "I just told the truth. The season destroyed itself. I terminated his contract that afternoon. It felt like cutting off a parasite. I filed a complaint with the Actors Union about unsafe set practices. I paid down Mina's debts one by one, because freedom is also spreadsheets. When Rowan finally agreed to meet my lawyer, he arrived looking older, the gloss worn off by stress. In the conference room, he tried once more to regain the narrative. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, like a man reading from a script he didn't understand. "You were convenient," I replied, "because honesty is sometimes a mercy." He flinched. "Dahlia was my past," he insisted. "You were my wife." I held his gaze. "Being someone's wife is not a personality," I said. "It's paperwork, and paperwork can be filed, amended, dissolved. I'm dissolving it." He stared at the contract in front of him as if it were a weapon. Then, with a shaking hand, he signed. In the weeks that followed, strangers treated my voice like a public utility. Women messaged me from office bathrooms, whispering that they had watched the live stream with earphones in and felt something in their rib cages unclench. Men messaged me too, mostly to tell me I was too loud and unfeminine, as if my volume had stolen their oxygen. Someone mailed a box of wilted white camellias to my building with a note that read, "Stay in your place." I photographed the note, logged the postage stamp, and forwarded everything to my lawyer, because intimidation is just evidence wearing cheap perfume. I started streaming again, not for revenge this time, but for routine. 10 minutes a day, one verified fact per segment, teaching viewers how to read contracts, how to archive screenshots, how to report threats without drowning in them. The algorithm liked rage, but I fed it clarity, and to my surprise, clarity traveled just as fast. One afternoon, Owen knocked on my courtyard door with a basket of oranges from a neighbor's tree. The chat had painted him as either a saint or a liar. In person, he looked like a tired actor who missed being a person. "I saw the messages," he said quietly, meaning Dahlia's instructions, the bribes, the little cruelties that had been staged like entertainment. I should have spoken up sooner. I peeled an orange slowly, letting the scent fill the space between us. "You didn't write the script," I said. "But you performed it." He flinched as if I had slapped him. "I know," he admitted. "I'm trying to learn the difference between being polite and being complicit." It was the first apology in this world that didn't come with a demand attached, and I realized I had been starving for that kind of honesty more than for any settlement. Faith confessed later, while we scrubbed mud from boots at the outdoor sink, that the rumor about her patron was half true and fully weaponized. "I borrowed money from a producer once," she said, eyes on the water. "It was for my mother's surgery. He made me take photos with him so people would assume the rest. Then he used the assumption to own me." She laughed bitterly. "I've been paying interest with my reputation." I told her what I used to tell sources in my old life. Shame is the easiest chain to lock, because the key is in your own pocket. "Let's take the key out," I said. The next day, on my stream, I explained in calm terms how coercion works in entertainment contracts, without naming her. Faith's shoulders loosened a fraction. A week later, she posted her own statement, and the comments under it were astonishingly more supportive than cruel. The internet can be vicious, but it can also be a crowd that holds you up when you finally stop pretending you're not falling. Kira and I met for coffee in a quiet shop after the production shut down, two women with reputations that had been used as chew toys. She looked at me over the rim of her cup and said, "You know what scares them most? Lawsuits?" I guessed. She snorted. "No. Time. They can survive a scandal if it fades. They can survive accusations if you get tired. They can survive hate because hate is predictable. What they can't survive is you building a life that doesn't orbit them." She slid a small card across the table, an editor's contact at a national paper, someone who still believed investigative work mattered. "Right," she said. "Use the attention while it's hot, then pivot to something they can't buy." I tucked the card into my notebook. For the first time since the van's headlights had filled my vision, the future felt less like an escape route and more like a road I could actually walk. The day the divorce became official, I didn't throw a party. I didn't post a triumphant selfie. I went home to my small apartment, opened the window, and let ordinary city noise wash through the room. I sat at the table where I used to count losses and now counted possibilities. In the drawer was a new notebook, clean pages waiting. I wrote my name at the top in ink that didn't belong to anyone else. I wrote the title of my new project, an independent investigative channel focused on entertainment industry, exploitation contracts, coercion, the lies hidden behind bright lights. I wrote a list of contacts to call, sources to meet, stories to chase. It felt like coming back to myself. That night, as I brushed my teeth, the air beside the mirror flickered. A familiar icon appeared, faint as a dying firefly. Heartbreak compliance system reconnecting. A progress wheel spun. For a moment I stood still, Foam at the corner of my mouth, heart thudding. The system's voice returned, weaker than before. "Congratulations," it said. "You have exceeded expected narrative deviation. Reward recalculation in progress. Return option available." I looked at the tiny spinning wheel and felt, unexpectedly, calm. "No," I said aloud. The icon blinked. "Decline."